Hello and welcome. Today we're doing a coffee chat, so grab your favorite beverage, coffee, tea, hot cocoa, whatever you want, Diet Pepsi, I don't care, but grab a beverage and we're going to have a little chat about the 4 money rules that I try to follow in my everyday budgeting life. Hi everybody, my name is Wendy, and this is my channel, Budget Pumpkin. I'm on a journey to becoming debt-free, and I'm going to do that by making better financial decisions, one baby step at a time. On this channel, we're going to talk about things like budgeting, cash stuffing, planning, dealing with debt, and some savings challenges. If you'd like to follow along, please subscribe, like, and make a comment in the video. Thanks for being here. Okay, so the 4 rules I try to follow are not necessarily, they're not my rules. I try to live by them, but they are actually the 4 rules that you follow when you use YNAB, which is short for You Need a Budget. And it is a software program for managing your money that literally saved my finances. It has saved it many, many times. And every time I stray from using it and I stray from following the rules, something kicks me in the booty and I got to get back on track. So I thought that I would share that with all of you today because it is the new year. I am recording this. It is New Year's Eve 2023. And this year is the year where we are going to make some good progress. My word of the year for 2024 is momentum. And so we are going to focus on things that bring us momentum in our regular life, in our financial life, and make things easier for us as we go through the year. So, rule number 1, and you've heard me say this a lot, is to give every dollar a job. And when you do that, it means when you get paid, and remember, we zero-based budget on this channel. So that means when we get paid, every dollar gets assigned, every penny has a purpose. We assign everything and it has a job. Now that job could be to pay the mortgage. It could be to buy groceries. It could have a job where it is sitting there in savings. Maybe I assign dollars to, auto care. I know that I don't need my car worked on right now. Hopefully, oh my God, the past year has been, when I counted it up, it was like $8,000 in car repairs that we did just in the past year. So, we're not saving as much, but hopefully we've got all the major stuff out of the way so that we can kind of do that. But, saving for a car, saving for your driver's license and plates. That's why I have all of those sinking funds that I can contribute money to. So if you look at our budget, subscriptions, but these sinking funds here. So driver's license and plates, professional licenses, vacation, medical, auto and home repair, home items, education. This money is just going to be sitting in the account waiting for purpose. And the reason why we do that is because we know we're going to need those things, which is actually kind of like rule number 2. But giving every dollar a job doesn't mean that you necessarily have to spend it right now. Okay? It could be a savings job. Number 2 is embrace your true expenses. Embracing your true expenses is what I had just talked about. I don't know when I'm going to need my car repaired. I know that I'm going to need to get it repaired. I knew that I was going to end up needing a new roof. and we ended up getting a new roof, and we had to restructure our debt and take out a loan to do so. But had we been able to set aside money to get the new roof, we wouldn't have had to take out the loan. But it was a true expense and it had to be done. Anything else, but what we really spend, if we're looking at our budget, we have to look at what we're truly spending our money on. And you know, before I started, well, it was after I started YNAB, and it was a number of years ago, but we were kind of using it more for tracking purposes and helping us make financial decisions. We weren't really using it to plan our goals. And what I realized is that every month I'd say, okay, we're going to spend $400 on groceries. And every month we would not only spend $600 on groceries, we would also spend $1,500 to $2,000 eating out. I'm not even kidding. And we had to look at that and be like, okay, so what are we going to do with this? Because it's not sustainable. And there's I could probably do a whole video just on our story about food, but what we ended up doing is we're looking at it, okay, where can we cut? Taking our lunches, meal planning, meal prepping, and reducing that, and actually doing that, looking at ourselves and realizing, like, okay, I came to realize that just in the food category, if we had dinner, right, and we had like our meat and our vegetable and our starch, whatever, we would pack up the roast, we would pack up the potatoes, we would pack up the vegetables all in separate containers and put in the fridge, and it would literally sit there and go bad. And so we actually had to come to the realization, I actually bought a bunch of like meal containers. And so when I was packing away our leftovers, I didn't pack them meat, potatoes, vegetables separate. I packed individual meals. And those individual meals, we are much more inclined to reach in the refrigerator, grab it out, throw it in a lunch bag, and head out to work. So it's just kind of like changing simple habits like that over the years. But those were what we were truly spending our money on, and that was one of the things that we had to get under control. But embracing your true expenses, what you're really spending money on and what you really need to spend money on, and then looking at it and adjusting. Speaking of adjusting, rule number 3 is to roll with the punches. And sometimes that means that the best laid out budget, like sometimes that isn't right. Like, there are times when we're really, really busy, that sometimes we just don't, either one of us have the mental capacity to do the meal prepping and planning. And that's okay. We actually found a place where we can get very healthy meals, and it's like $80 for 10 meals, 10 frozen meals. And there's days that I have to, or weeks that I have to go and I have to get those meals and buy them, and we put them in the freezer, and that's what we eat. And it's a little bit more expensive than grocery shopping, but it is a lot less expensive than eating out. And sometimes we just have to do that for our mental capacity. Rolling with the punches also means, like, if you're saving money for your car and your home and you know, whatnot, and maybe you have a major car repair and your repair goes over what you have in that number, then maybe you have to pull the money from your home repair or other categories to cover this larger expense. And basically this is just saying that your budget is fluid. There's no right answer for the categories that you have. And a lot of times it's just experimenting. And don't ever feel guilty about moving money from cash from one area to another area. Don't feel guilty about maybe using up your emergency fund. Because as long as overall that you're paying cash for stuff, and then you're making a conscious effort to replenish that cash back into your budget, that's okay. It's okay. It's okay to have to take an expensive trip because you have to go because a loved one is passing away. There are things that in life that are important, and some things are more important. And don't ever feel guilty about having to adjust your budget to accommodate those things. Don't ever feel guilty about having to adjust your budget because you need a break with your mental health. Don't ever feel guilty. A budget is a plan for your money. It's not something to induce guilt. It's not. And it's kind of like a diet. A lot of people are like, well, I'm going to go on a diet because I've been overeating. Well, no, your diet is what you eat every day. Now, you may choose to have a junk food diet, or you may choose to have a healthier diet. And you know what? Whatever your mental capacity is, that's okay. You're eating. The same thing with your budget. You know, you have a guideline, you have a rough idea of where you want to go, but priorities change. You know, life changes. And so don't ever feel guilty about having to move money from like one category to another to accommodate those changes. And the fourth rule that they have is to age your money. And so what that means is to get a month ahead is their first one. So basically, we're working on, right now, we're halfway there. The money from our last check in December is covering the first half of January. We were paid on, was it December 29th? It's Friday. And the money from that check's going to the first half of January. Now, if you're paid that December 29th, your next check's going to be January 12th. That's going to cover the last half of January. And in terms of magic months, if you are paid like I am, I do believe our next one is in May. I don't have this calendar numbered, but I think in May is our next paycheck, 3-paycheck month. So if you have more than, if you have like an extra paycheck, because when you get paid bi-weekly, you get 2 months a year with 3 paychecks instead of 2. So in May, our second check in May is going to cover, or our middle check in May will cover the first half of June. Our second check in May will cover the second half of June. Then we'll be a month ahead. And what happens when you're a month ahead is you see how much money you have going into the next month, and then you can budget appropriately. Do things happen? Do emergencies happen? Absolutely. But if you have an idea of what you have going into the month, you can make better financial decisions in total about the whole month. Okay, so all these rules are from the software called YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget. I love this software. It has really saved us when we do it. But it's the software on the computer, and there's an app for your phone, which I really like. Now, I'm going to go over, I was watching Reels, and I follow Dave Ramsey because I do like to listen to things that people have to say. And he has like his 7 baby steps, which we'll go over next. But he said 5 things that I really agree with that were pretty profound. And so these are our 5 things from Dave Ramsey. So number 1 is you need to have a written plan, a budget. I agree with that. Until we started actually having a budget and having a plan, our finances were all over the place, and it was messy. And it's like you're in the days before GPS, and you're trying to get somewhere and you don't have a map. you need a map of where you want to go. And it's so easy. Like, we all the time before YNAB, we used to be like, well, my husband would be like, I'm getting overtime on this check. I want to get this, and this. Not realizing that this was actually more than the overtime, and we only be able to find like the first two things. So I like that, you know, having a written plan, a budget, and I do believe that you do not want to budget money that you don't have. You don't want to forecast. You want to budget, and budget a cash zero-based budget, every dollar job. I don't know if I can get any closer for you guys so you can see that a little bit better. There we go. I think that might be better. Okay, number 2, the second thing that he said that made a lot of sense to me is you've got to get out of debt. And I agree with that. I totally agree with that. It's literally killing us, and it literally kills most people. I mean, look at this. So this is our budget for January. And car insurance, car and payment, 15. So we bring in roughly $7,000 a month. I have $4,065 for bills, but $1,500 of that is our loan, where we had to buy our roof, and we just ended up paying off all our credit cards with that loan. I've done videos on it, but basically our roof started leaking. We had to get a loan to fix it, and if we got the loan, we would not be able to afford a payment on it because we were stretched so thin because of our credit card debt, which is a whole other story. So suffice it to say, we paid off all the credit cards, and we took on this $1,500 loan. Well, even with our mortgage at $1,150, our expenses are more than 50% of our bring home income. And even if we had this $1,500 less, we would be at like $2,565. If our house was paid off, we would be at 25, 14-ish, $1,400 a month in expenses. When you only have $1,400 a month in expenses and you're bringing home $7,000 a month, and then I'm just talking about bills. I mean, obviously we have our grocery and stuff down there, but you know, if we had we'll say $1,500 in expenses, and we're bringing home $7,000, that's what, $5,500 a month that we could afford to do whatever we wanted with. We could save it. We could vacation. We could afford to save up cash to buy cars, or at least a hefty down payment. There's so much more that we could be doing with the money that we bring in on a monthly basis if we were not strapped with this cash right here. So I do agree with that. I do agree that you have to pay off your debt. Let's see. That's the second thing he said. The third thing he said, number 3, is live on less than you make. I agree with that. We literally just talked about that. What could we do with that, you know, $5,500 a month if we weren't paying on our debt? That's living on less than we make. And I do say that our current budget that we're running with right now, for the first time in a long time, that's paycheck cash flow. This one, if we do this and we add up all of our numbers, we have a surplus of like $114.54. That's a surplus. So we have a little bit of wiggle room every month. If you're living on less than you're bringing in, you're saving a little bit. If you are spending more than you bring in, then you're creating debt and you're digging yourself into a hole. And you know, sometimes it has to happen. Sometimes life happens. Like
When I was off on my medical leave, we created additional debt because we weren't bringing enough to fund just the bare minimum of our lifestyle. And we weren't being frivolous while I was off work. But if we were living on less than we made, we could have better prepared for that situation. Number 4 that he said is save your money. And we're horrible at this. My husband and I have traditionally been very horrible at saving our money because we like to spend it. It's a gratification. Do you want this? Do you want that? It has taken a long, long time for us to get to the point where we're like, okay, we need to set aside money. We need to set aside money in these sinking funds. We need to set aside cash in advance for things, for our, we need to set aside cash in advance for things like our driver's licenses, plates, professional licenses, vacations. We need to set this money aside in advance. We need to save for the things that are going to happen in our life that we know that are going to happen, that are inevitable, that we can prepare for, right? So that's like the whole embracing your true expenses, saving your money. And then the last one he said was to be outrageously generous. And quite frankly, I love this. I love this, right? I love to give gifts. Like, if I see something that reminds me of someone, like right now, because we're on a budget, a lot of times I'll take a picture of it and send it to them and be like, hey, I'm thinking about you. I saw this, it reminded me of you. In my heart, I would rather be able to buy that thing and give it to them. I would like to be able to set up a college fund for our niece. I would like to be able to donate more to charity. I would like to be able to help people. Those are things that are all in my nature. And these are things that I've had to stop doing because we were not in the financial situation to do so. We're not right now. We're talking about moving things around right now because my husband's aunt passed away, and just to help with a few of the funeral expenses. What can we move around? How much can we give? Because someone's paying for our funeral expenses who really shouldn't be. And it's just a family thing, and I'm not going to really get into it, but it would be nice to be able to give them some money to help with those funeral expenses. So these are 5 things that Dave Ramsey has said that I do agree with. Okay. And I don't always agree with his delivery for a number of reasons, but I think that a lot of time that his intention is very good. And I've been listening a lot to his podcasts and different stuff where people call in, and I think that I feel like his intentions are good. His method is not my favorite, and I've not been a big fan of his, but what he does say makes sense. What he says makes sense for the average American that needs to get out of debt, and I do agree with that. And we're also going to really quick go over also Dave Ramsey's baby steps, because I did read I don't know if he has more than one book, but he had a book where he talked about it. It was given to me as a gift. And I did read the book, and he had a lot of really good points. And so I just kind of wanted to go over his 7 baby steps, because when I first started my financial journey, I really didn't have YNAB, and that was all that I had to follow. So number 1, he wants you to have $1,000 emergency fund. Do I agree with this? I do agree that we need an emergency fund. And I do agree that you need an emergency fund because what happens is once you start aggressively paying off your debt, things are inevitably going to happen. Although, like with us, our emergencies were way more than $1,000. I mean, $1,000 was like our minimum emergency, and they came quick. Like, literally, my husband would have $1,000 car repair on his car, and then I followed up with a $2,700 repair that I had to get done. So, do I agree with this? Sort of. I really feel that if you can swing it, you really need a $2,500 emergency fund. When he came up with this $1,000 emergency fund number, things cost a lot less. I mean, when I heard about this, my husband and I could go out and get breakfast. I'm probably going to date myself, but we could go out and get breakfast for like $3.29, get 2 eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. My husband and I could go out for breakfast and with the tip spend like $15. We can't even come close to that today. One, because I have to get gluten-free toast, which isn't always an upcharge. But we went out to breakfast the other day and we both got the special, and it was like $20 with like my coffee and my gluten-free toast, and he had water. And then with the tip, we still spent like $25. So I feel like, yes, you need an emergency fund. I feel like you need more. I feel like you need a $2,500 emergency fund. Number 2, his baby step number 2, is to pay off your debt. Do I agree with this? Absolutely, I agree with it. Pay off your debt. Although, because the Fed has raised interest rates so much to battle the inflation that we were having, it's caused the credit card interest rates to really go up. So like if you had a credit card and you were paying 12 to 14% interest, that was a lot of interest back then when he started his program, right? And I think the average person now, if they've had issues or whatever, I'm seeing a lot of interest rates closer to 19 to 30%, right? Now, once the Fed starts cutting the interest rate, we might see that the credit card interest rates drop. But if the credit card companies realize, like, hey, we can still charge this interest and it's not illegal, then they're going to keep charging that interest rate. And so that was one of the reasons why we ended up restructuring our debt. Honestly, in this economy, if you had to file bankruptcy, if you had to do credit counseling, or restructuring your debt, this is a judgment-free zone. I get if you had to do that, but you do have to pay off your debt. We've already talked about how our debt payments were killing us. And quite honestly, if we look at this here, okay, our loan is $1,500 a month, but when we were paying on our credit cards, we were paying $2,000 a month in credit card minimum payments. And at our interest rate, we were paying between $1,000 and $1,100 a month, just in interest that accrued every month, which is why we were not making any traction getting our credit cards paid off. It's really not the best idea to take unsecured debt like a credit card and roll it into something that's secured like your home. But we were also fortunate enough that our mortgage payment is only $1,150. And our loan payment is really like $750. We're doubling it. But even at like $1,150 with $750, it's like $1,900 a month for mortgage payment is actually pretty typical right now. So if you can't afford it, we were in a good situation. If you can't afford it for your credit cards, that's okay, but do something to get rid of the debt. And you're going to do what you have to do to make sure that you remain with the cash flow. And quite frankly, as I said, no judgment here if that's something that you have to do, because we are in weird times right now. But this even just restructuring our debt at that lower payment has given us wiggle room and breathing room, and is for our mental health is actually better, because it was really hard to always be so rigid about what we could and could not spend. So, and he also advises like he calls it gazelle speed is what he called it in his book, pay it off, get another job to pay it off, eat beans and rice until you pay it off. And so I don't necessarily, quite frankly, if we were to eat beans and rice until we paid off our debt, my husband's diabetic, and so he would literally probably be in a diabetic coma if the only thing I've paid him or fed him was beans and rice. So you have to go at your own comfort level too. Sometimes I don't like how aggressive he is with people, because people have situations that they live in. Number 3, his third baby step, is to get 3 to 6 months of expenses. This is another one where I agree, but I also disagree. I really, truly think, and hang on, let me go back to this and write it. Pay off your debt. I also think like restructure or credit counseling. Or bankruptcy as a last resort. These are all valid. We've got to do what we've got to do in these unprecedented times. Down here, 3 to 6 months of expenses. I don't agree with. I do and I don't. Once we get this paid off, I want us to have 3 to 6 months of bring home income. That's what I want to see in our reserves. And the reason why you do this is because it gives you stability. If you have a job loss, if you maybe you're having a baby or having a life event, maybe you need to take time off to care for a loved one at the end of their life, anything like that. But I like to see 3 to 6 months of income, because if you have 3 to 6 months of income where what you're normally bringing in, and you can maintain the same lifestyle for that long, if you really had to, you might be able to stretch this into, 6 to 12 months of expenses. So you can always stretch your income further, right? Because we bring in more, ideally, we're bringing in more than we're spending. And so if you have 3 to 6 months of income saved, start with 3 to 6 months of expenses, but then once you have 3 to 6 months of income saved, you can stretch that if something happens, if you have an extended sickness or something like that, you're going to have that money in reserve. So I like your income, not your expenses. Number 4, invest 15% for retirement. I agree with this. I think this one, it kind of, there's variables that go in here. Your age and how long you have to retire, how much debt that you have. So there are variables here. Currently we are contributing, at my work. I'm lucky enough, if I contribute 3%, I get a 9% match. So I'm putting 12% away right now. Do I want to bump this up after our debts are paid off? Absolutely. But I would probably start investing for retirement, because I'm a lot closer to that age. Investing this while we're saving up 3 to 6 months of income. I'm going to kind of do these simultaneously. Number 5, he says to save for college funds. We don't really have anybody to save for, unless we want to go back to school ourselves. So maybe we'll do this. Maybe this is a step that we'll skip. It just kind of depends on what your life is. You may want to save for, a family member, a child, maybe a niece or nephew, maybe a grandchild, whoever you want to save for. But you can skip this step if you don't have anybody who needs that in your life. Number 6, pay off your house early. Absolutely. Absolutely. If you can do it, absolutely do that. Because once you've paid off your debt, now you have to remember that, like, student loans, you can't discharge in a bankruptcy. Those have to be paid. So after all of our consumer debt is paid and our loan is paid, we're going to actually start paying on my husband's student loans that are in deferment right now. We're going to be paying on them. Now, he is a nurse and he can apply for loan forgiveness. But I'm not going to count on that to getting those paid off. So we pay off our credit cards, pay off his student loans, and then we're going to pay off our house early. Because quite frankly, if you live on taxes and in homeowners insurance, like, our taxes here where we live are about, I think, $3,300 to $3,500 a year. And then our homeowners insurance, I think on the high side, I don't think it's as much, but it'd be like $1,200 a year. So $1,200 plus $3,500 is $4,700 a year. I don't know if you can see that. Divide that by 12. That's $391.66. So for less than $400 a month, we're going to be able to live in our house, which is going to free up more money. And number 7, build wealth and give. Right. Which is kind of what we talked up here about: be outrageously generous, build wealth and give. You're building for your future, you're building for your future legacy, you're giving, you can donate to the things that matter to you, whether it be family members or charities or whatever. But when you cut out all of this, then you can do this, right? So these are down here, the Dave Ramsey baby steps. But these are these are my 4 rules that I really live by. Getting a lot of shadow. These are 4 rules that I live by, and these are, I think, some other good rules that we've talked about. Hopefully this helps you on your budgeting journey. I know that all these things can help me. I started out with the baby steps from Dave Ramsey, but then once I found YNAB, I moved into these, and then but this also made a lot of sense that I found on his podcast the other day. So hopefully this helps you in your journey. And if you're still here, thank you for being here. Thank you if you're a new subscriber. Thank you if you've been around for a long time. Please like and subscribe. My plan is to do some sort of financial look once a week. We'll see. And that would be in addition to my regular cash stuffing and budgeting videos. So hopefully this helps you. And because it's definitely helped me, and so it's something that I wanted to go over on the channel for you. So we will see you on the next video.